everyone. We're really lucky to have an incredible guest today, somebody a little out of the ordinary in animal welfare. She began her advocacy work actually in the Peace Corps. She spent a year in Slovakia. Then she went to law school, and she has spent the last 17 years working on animal welfare legislation, primarily on the state level. She spent 2 years with Fund for Animals, but the last 15 years, she's been working at the Humane Society of the United States, coordinating state and federal priorities. And we're really happy to welcome today Andi Bernat. Thank you for being with us. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. Doing good considering the circumstances, but we're making it through.
So you're obviously working from home, or do you have a family at home with you?
I do. I have my 2 sons who are 11 and 13, and they are actually loving this because they don't have to get up in the morning and don't have to go to school. And I have my 2 rescue dogs here with me that I'm so grateful I have them because they've really provided a lot of comfort and love for our family during this time.
So now you're home, and I'm obviously you're needing to do homeschooling, which is what all the parents are doing now, and at the same time, you are working with HSUS and the state director, and you have the very big task of working with the Humane Society of the United States on local and federal policy during a global pandemic.
Yes, so we are fortunate at the Humane Society of the United States to have over 40 state directors who work in their state capitals and have a lot of experience on policy issues, in addition to shelter issues. And because they have already formed a lot of these relationships with the executive level and the legislative level in their states, and even at the local and county level, they were really able to pivot quickly and reach out to the right people and get the ear of the right people to make sure that when states started to close down and we started to get some shelter in place orders, to make sure that shelter staff was considered essential, that veterinarians were considered essential, and that the care of companion animals and animals who are in captivity were included as essential services to be sure that no animals suffer during this.
Andi, I was a state director in North Carolina for 5.5 years. And, I remember what that job was like with, you have to be a generalist on just about every topic there is on animal welfare. What's it like for state directors right now? Like, what is their daily life like?
Well, I think they're doing a lot of work with their community, working with a lot of the other departments at the Humane Society of the United States to make sure that people who are in need of pet food and other supplies to keep their animals healthy are able to get that. We do a lot of coordination, which I'm sure you've spoken about before, with other groups. They are working with a lot of their state agencies and also at the local level, again, to be sure that certain services are essential. They're working with our volunteers, they're working with shelters in their state. And we are actually still doing some of our policy work that's not COVID related. Some state legislatures are still in session and a lot of it might be virtual. And we're seeing a lot of counties that are still passing ordinances and policy issues that, believe it or not, are not related to coronavirus that we've been working on for a while. So we are still, it's at a much smaller level, but we are still kind of plugging along with our work, our pre-coronavirus work.
Wow, so state directors are dealing with this whole new set of policies that involve animals in disaster, and at the same time, some of them are still working on just their regular day-to-day work. How fast out of the gate was the Humane Society of the United States when these stay-at-home orders started, when we started looking at what was essential and what was non-essential? How did that work?
Well, again, because our state directors have been in the state capitals and have been already working with agencies and governors, counties on other issues, and a lot of them in previous disasters, and none to this extent, but you probably had this experience too in North Carolina with weather-related disasters where we already have these relationships formed. And so it was very easy for them to pivot and know the right people to reach out to, and the right people knew them and recognize their credibility of their work in the state. And we really had a lot of success in getting governors and state governments to keep these services essential. I think that a lot of the lessons we've learned from previous disasters like Katrina were that it is imperative that we all include our pets, our companion animals, in any disaster planning for this current disaster we're in, for future disasters that we're in. It just is not going to work, and it's not going to work for people, it's not going to work for animals unless they are included in all of the planning.
Sure, I mean, they're part of our families.
Right.
What are the state directors feeling like some of the things that they're seeing are going to come from COVID-19 on the horizon for legislation? Are there any things that have stood out to this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that stood out is the wildlife trade, because this originated from the wildlife trade in China, but we have a thriving domestic wildlife trade here that is just as much a risky industry for human health. And it's something that we have been working on for years at the Humane Society of the United States, and our Humane Society International and Humane Society Legislative Fund partners have also been working on. And I think now we have a lot more credibility. I think people are going to really listen a lot closer to what we're saying, what we have been saying on the risk of the captive wildlife markets and the captive wildlife trade, which includes pets and circuses and zoos, and just sort of this irresponsible relationship we're having with wildlife, and how it is now not just an animal cruelty issue, it's also a human safety, a human health issue. That's probably the most prevalent thing. The other thing we're seeing a lot more now with some of the high infection rates in slaughterhouses is this it's really spotlighting how the current industrial agriculture, animal agriculture system is just not efficient. It's not effective. It's not safe. It's not healthy. It's really creating a lot of problems, and there are a lot of sound alternatives, obviously, to what we have currently in place in the United States. And I guess we'll see what the future holds in terms of these facilities remaining open with such rampant infection rates. But again, a policy that our organization has worked on for years is to really rethink and change that high-level, high-scale industrial animal agriculture system that we have here, and get it to something more sustainable, that's more humane, and now obviously safer and healthier. And then probably the last area we're seeing is, again, this is a theme that we've seen and we've worked on for years that I talked about earlier, is the need to include companion animals and all animals, quite frankly, in our disaster planning, and our future work, and making sure that we have sound systems in place to protect all animals. And that would include, I think, a lot of work where we're seeing a lot of underserved communities are even suffering more as a result of COVID. And those communities have pets, they have families that need protection. And I think we're really going to see even more of a need for some of the low-income services we can provide for companion animals in terms of vet care, in terms of feeding and housing and other needs. There are some programs in place pre-COVID, but right now during this crisis, we're really seeing a need for it. And I think we're going to really see a need for it once we sort of get back to normal, because I would imagine that the economic circumstances for a lot of people are going to really struggle for a few years to come until we can get really back to normal.
Recently, Tyson Foods has come out and gave a warning that our food system is floundering. We have already been paying billions of dollars in tax dollars to these large-scale commercial farmers or factory farms for bailout money when they are already producing too many animals for the demand. So it was already faltering. What does HSUS have to say about that, and where do you see this all going? This is a really scary time. They're talking about the possibility of us being out of food, but at the same time, sustainable farmers are selling out.
Yeah. mean, I think it's another wake-up call, and hopefully a very loud wake-up call to a lot of people. Again, what our industrial agriculture system that is in place now in the United States is not going to work. It has failed on so many levels at a lot of different times on the animal cruelty side, on the human health, the animal health, the environmental, and now obviously the infectious disease side. And there really needs to be a massive overhaul of our animal agriculture process that the Humane Society of the United States has been advocating for years, along the lines of our policy work on the confinement of animals and the speed at which the animals are processed through slaughterhouses, which is one of the reasons why you're seeing these cramped conditions where this infectious disease has really, really gone rampant, is because they're working in small, fast-paced environments that we have tried to work through litigation and through legislation and continue to work with to try and change that to be more, to be safer, to be more humane, and obviously now to be more protective of our entire globe, quite frankly, because, and this is not the first time we've seen a public health disaster as a result of industrial animal agriculture.
So Humane Society of the United States works to protect all animals from cruelty and neglect. And we, in our short interview that we've just had, have talked about everything from veterinary care for the underserved community and ensuring that we're able to do that. We've talked about factory farms. We've talked about disaster response. Catherine, do you have any more questions for Andi?
We heard a rumor that you have a miracle dog.
She's right here.
We'd like to meet her, don't you think, Kim?
I think so.
This is Julia.
Oh my goodness, look at her.
She is she's a rescue from Tennessee. I don't know a lot of her history, but she's been with me for about 6 years. But she's had a few medical emergencies. She was hit by a car and she survived, but she has a little bit of paralysis, so she's incontinent. She has a diaper, and she had a few altercations with. Oh, are you tired? She had a few altercations with some larger dogs. So my emergency vet here loves me, but I do have pet health insurance, which I highly recommend for anyone. And I'm so glad I have her, during the shelter in place, because it's so great to have like a warm, fluffy, loving dog there with you all the time. So she's been loving it. Julia has been loving this crisis that we're in.
How people would shelter in place without a pet. They're such a huge part of my day, and they bring me so much comfort.
Yeah.
Well, we have certainly enjoyed our experience with you here today, Andi, and just want to say thank you for all the amazing work that you've done on behalf of animals, and that we know you will continue to do into the future. And we would love to get some updates from you moving forward. And if that would also include Julia, that would be great.
Of course, she'd love it.
So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks.
Bye, Andi.